Hey folks, you're listening to the Ginger and Chocolate Podcast, real talk about mental and physical health. I'm Lindsay Hyken, and along with my co-host Mike Ergo, we're here to talk to you about all things related to physical and mental well-being, as well as our own love of endurance sports, and to share the other random thoughts that pop into our heads. You can find us on Instagram at Ginger and Chocolate Podcast, join our Facebook page, Ginger and Chocolate, and look us up by name, Lindsay Hyken and Mike Ergo on Strava. If you have questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to direct message us through our social media accounts. And if you enjoy the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's get to the show. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the Ginger and Chocolate Podcast. Hey, Mike. Hey, Norm.
Hey.
How's it going?
Perfect. Couldn't be better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, listeners, you know today is our first day of our new podcast name. And Mike and I are super excited to kind of do our rebranding because we're really leaning into our, I would say, not focus. What's the word I'm thinking of? Our why, but not real. I mean,
well, just how much we place importance on mental health and the intersection of mental and physical health.
Exactly. So we're kicking off the first episode with my buddy Norm, who is an amazing guy, and he's perfect for us because he also uses long distance running and other things to to treat some mental health or to support good mental health. And I'm really excited to have him here. So Norm, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking time to talk to us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. You started shaking your head, and I was like, you're going to have to say it verbally.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to start off a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background in terms of what you do with the running and how you kind of got into it. Just start us off with that a little bit.
Sure. So I was a wrestler in high school and college, and we did a lot of running, as part of our conditioning for that sport. And once I completed my education, I got out into the work world, and I was still staying fit. I mean, I'm a gym rat. I was a kid that grew up on the playground, played every sport, whatever season it was, we played it from sun up to sundown. So somehow, when I couldn't wrestle competitively anymore, I started running. And in the back of my mind, I always wanted to do a marathon. And I was in a conversation with a mutual friend of my wife and I's one afternoon. She said, "I'm training for a marathon." I was like, "What?" And she started to explain to me that she was hooked up with Team in Training. They were training her to do a marathon and so on and so forth. I was like, "I want in." So she said they have them. Anyway, long story short there, another friend of mine and I went to one of their events, signed up for a marathon, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, trained for that marathon, finished the marathon. It was not pretty, but I did finish it, and I was pretty much hooked.
And that was a road marathon. Yeah. That was road
correct.
running. Okay.
That was in San Francisco.
So you had some hills.
Nikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hills and a lot of blacktop.
God.
San Francisco is a beautiful town to run through, but it was hard on my legs, and it was a long day, but I did finish it. So that's how it started.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that you did this like hilly, hard
first marathon in San Francisco.
I mean, that's not the easiest marathon to do for your first. And it was hard on your legs, and then you were hooked on it after that.
Yeah. What was it? Just the feeling of running? Was it the accomplishment of coming through the finish line? What do you think hooked you?
Um, I love to compete. I love to train. First of all, I enjoyed the training process a lot, especially with that one. There was a group of people. We did group runs. We trained together. So the training process for that and for every race I've done since then is a big component in what I love about it. And then I like to compete. I like to get out there. Not that I'm competitive in the race. I'm one, what you would affectionately call a back of the packer, but that doesn't stop me from mentally being competitive, wanting to do the best I can do
Mm-hmm.
out there. And so those are the things that fuel me once I'm in the race. And I just love being out there. I love being in the game, so to speak, to coin that
Yes.
phrase. Yeah,
That game day mindset. You show up ready to race. You get mentally
absolutely.
prepared.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
So, okay. So you started with the marathon, and we're going to get into some of the longer stuff that you've done later because I'm super fascinated by that. It's something that's kind of like on my bucket list a little bit, but I'd like to kind of tie this into how you use this to support your good mental health. I love that you texted me and you're like, your podcast talks about the exact things that are my favorite things to talk
Mhm,
about. So
mhm.
tell us a little bit about that, as much as you're comfortable with or whatever.
Yeah,
Mike and I are very open with our stuff, but we don't
yeah,
necessarily mean that you have to share everything, but whatever you're
yeah,
comfortable with.
yeah. Of course, Lindsay. Yeah. So the that first marathon I did, I had been. I'm going to just say I've been clean and sober for oh gosh, probably 10 or 15 years by then. And it's been fine for me. But I noticed that once I started doing training and doing longer distance runs, I felt better. I felt better physically. I felt better mentally. And something happens for me the minute I even sign up for a race. Like all of a sudden I have something to focus on besides
Yeah.
me. And besides, I mean, my world can just become very, very small at times. And when it's like that, it's not comfortable necessarily, and it's not productive necessarily. But once I expand it by way of a race, especially a longer race, something that I know is going to test me on all fronts, all of a sudden my head just becomes completely clear, and now I have that, so to speak, that track to run on, and all of a sudden everything becomes clear. My recovery becomes clearer. I take better care of myself. I'm sleeping better. I'm eating better. So it's just kind of an across the board upside for me. And that happened almost immediately. And I can get into some. There's a fine line. I don't know if you want me to do that right
Mhm.
now. We can get into it a little bit later. But there's that fine line for me. That expression, nothing in moderation.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's me. That's probably, I know that's you, Lindsay. That's
Mhm.
probably you, Mike.
Yep.
There's that fine line between
Mhm.
healthy participation and just going over that line. And
Mhm.
I can teeter there and go over it, in fact,
Mhm.
and I have a few times.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because for me anyway, the things that there's two sides of the coin of that personality of that addictive alcoholic whatever, that personality. There's two there's a bad side or the downside, I should say. It's not bad, but the downside is, you can be an addict or an alcoholic and that's the side where you could then overdo it in the sport and get obsessive with it and get kind of crazy and make it not fun and make it not healthy.
Yeah.
There's also the other side of that, which is, I think, in a way, that's almost like the adventurous side. Like that's the side that embraces change and challenge and something new and trying things that scare me and pushing myself a little bit further and not just staying in my comfort zone. I think that's part of that personality. And so that can be a benefit, right? Like I think
Yes.
I picture you, Norm, running through the trees, and it's like that's feeding that part of you in a healthy way.
Yeah.
As long as you
Yes.
don't, stay out in the trees for weeks on end at the cost of, everything else.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's also the, a lot of us can be risk takers, the risky behavior that doesn't end up so well when we are left to our own devices and using. But if you can engage that in a healthy way, take those risks and like say a race, then it's put to good use. It seems to me it's more about focusing that kind of energy than trying to deny that it's part of you. And it seems like that's what you're doing, Norm.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly.
Yeah, because I mean, you've been sober a long time, Norm. I mean, because I know you've been running a long time, and you saying you started a marathon when you were like 10, 15 years sober. So you've been sober a long time. And I think, for listeners who aren't part of the recovery community, maybe you don't have a problem, or maybe you haven't admitted you have a problem yet, or whatever it is. This is not a like thing where you go to rehab or whatever you do to get over it, and then it's just done. It's sort of like part of you. Not sort of. It's a big part of you forever, right? And so it needs constant treatment in the sense of like, on a
Like
daily
hygiene, right?
basis. Yeah. I mean, you just, it's so you have to kind of change your lifestyle to be part of recovery for a long time. So it's not like Norm's got, you know, tons and tons of years of sobriety now. He doesn't have to worry about it. It's like there's still things you have to address, and that's where what Mike said comes in, right? It denying that is part of you is not going to work because it's just there.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Harnessing it for good and health is something that's a possibility. Okay, so let's flip a little bit back to how you got from running a road marathon with Team in Training, because there's a lot of people that do TNT and continue to do stuff, and there's a lot of people who do TNT, and like my friend Devin said, I said, how was your marathon? It was her first marathon. She did what you did, Team in Training marathon, and she was like, it broke me. And she was like, I'm going back to baking, which is what I really love to do. I was like, go girl. So how did you get from there to kind of the trail running and then from the trails to the ultra distance stuff? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, that I got chills. That's somewhere along the line, I overheard this guy talking about a book he'd read. And I'm sure Dean Karnazes' book, Confessions of an All-Night Runner, Ultra Marathon Man. I said, I got to read that book. All-Night Runner, like, I got to read that book.
Relate to that, yeah.
I read that book, and that started, not only for me, that started a craze. So I said, okay, I've run a marathon. Now I need to do an ultra marathon, which is anything over 26.2 miles. So I registered for a race. I don't remember which one it was, but it was a 50K. And I'm sure, I don't remember, this has been a while. So I'm sure I finished it, and I probably did a couple of more. Then I read somewhere, I started reading Trail Runner magazine. So I'm starting down that road. And I read that really a true ultra is a 50 miler, And I'm like, oh shit, now I got to do a 50 miler. And so where Lindsay and I live, there's a running club called Coastside Running Club. So it's a very friendly group, and there are some badass runners in that group, some very elite long distance runners. So I started getting started getting involved in that a little more. And one of the guys in the group said, so I signed up for a 50 miler, trained for the 50 miler, finished the 50 miler. And I told him about it. He's going, that's not really even, it was too easy for him. He's going, that's not really even a 50 miler. So I took the bait. I registered for a tougher 50 miler. Things started to change at that point. I realized that I needed some help. And this is where it dovetails into the recovery part of it. So I hired a run coach, and I noticed a huge difference once I had done that. Having a coach is like having a sponsor, so to speak, in our program, where it was a person that kept me on the rails, so to speak, from overdoing it, overtraining, getting injured, so on and so forth. So I had finished that other 50 miler, and then this is where it really gets interesting. I read in Trail Runner magazine somewhere, and it said, in ultra running, the signature distance is really 100 miles. And, and if there's a signature distance in something I'm doing, I got to do it.
Yeah.
And that was it. Excuse me, I lost my. So it was on after that, Lindsay. I signed up for 100 miler.
Do you remember which 100 mile was your first 100 mile?
Oh yeah, it was the Rio del Lago.
Oh,
Yeah, and I looked it up because I didn't remember exactly the year I did. I think it was 2014 or 2015, and I trained very rigorously for that race. And I finished it. I made
nice.
Yeah. So, and that was an adventure all unto itself. But once I did that and I got that buckle, I was like, okay, I'm in. I can sit at the grown-up table now in our little running club. And so that's how it all progressed. It was 99% ego driven, quite honestly. But along the way, it fed just parts of my life and my personality that are so fun. Yeah.
So, okay, Rio del Lago, for listeners who may not be familiar with ultra running or trail running, can you kind of describe a little bit about the terrain and what it's like to do that race? Because the number of hours, because when you say all night runner, you literally mean running through the night on trails. So just, not everyone is necessarily familiar with that. Kind of tell us what it was like a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It's that race in particular, it's up in the Sierra foothills. It starts in Granite Bay. The course has changed a little bit over the years. The year I did it, the beginning of the race we start at 5:30 in the morning, bright and early. Of course, you don't even sleep the night before.
Yeah, who does? Who sleeps well before a race?
No, and I don't.
I don't know anybody who does.
Yeah. So, we're out there. The first 10 or 15 miles is actually blacktop. You're running through Folsom and Granite Bay, and then you start heading up. You come back to the big hub of the race, big aid station. Then you start heading up into the foothills and start running toward Auburn. And the rest of the race is all single track trail, pretty rigorous. There's a funny thing about some of these races. You'll hear, that's an easy 100 miler. And let me tell you, there's no such thing as an easy 100 miler. The elite people, the elite men and women, sure, they can blast through something like that. But it was a tough race. So we were up single track up into Auburn, a lot of hills, very technical. At one point, we'd done our loops up in Auburn and we're heading back down toward the finish line in Granite Bay. I still had I don't know, a good 30 plus miles to go. I'd been out there for 20 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Mentally, I started to lose it a little bit, and I really felt like I was quitting. I had a friend pacing me out there, and I could feel myself quitting. I could feel myself giving myself excuses. You have to, on those races, by the way, there are cutoffs where you have to be at a certain point by a certain time. And if you're not there at that certain time, you're done. They take you off the course.
Pull you off.
Yeah. And I was starting to calculate. So we were heading to the cutoff at mile 75. And in my mind, I'm already calculating, I don't want to make that cutoff.
Yeah.
I was already quitting.
That's interesting. You were calculating you don't want to make the cutoff, not I'm not gonna make the cutoff. More like I'm gonna slow it down. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, the mental games we play, right?
Oh, that's the truth. And it was painful. As I started that course up there, is really toward the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles, you're out on these levees. In Granite Bay and in Folsom, and you can hear everything. The sound just reverberates. I could hear the PA announcer calling finishers in, and all the excitement of these people finishing. And I'm thinking to myself, you're not going to finish. You've quit on this. And somehow, some way, off in the distance, I could hear my coach and a couple of other good friends. I could hear their voice yelling at me. And my poor pacer friend, she just was like, there was nothing else she could do to pull it out of me. I could hear them telling me, you got to hustle, man. I mean, we were up against it, and something flipped inside of me, and I just took off. We got into the aid station. You had to weigh in to make sure they make sure your weight is fine, that physiologically you're good. I had 20 seconds to spare.
Oh my God.
Cutting
that one close.
20 seconds to spare. At mile 75, boom, got on the scale, made the weight, grabbed my pack, changed pacers. We took off, and I don't know what happened, but something shifted in me, and we just started dropping people. We started catching people, dropping people, and I started picking up speed. We ended up finishing 30 minutes ahead of the cutoff. We picked up 30 minutes in the last 25 miles.
That's amazing.
Can I ask you something about that, Norm? So,
of course,
I know the highs and lows of my longest event, an Ironman triathlon, which is roughly 12 hours for me. But in something longer than that, it seems like there's a lot of room for a lot of highs and a lot of lows. Can you tell when that's starting to shift back up into a high, or when you're starting to get yourself out of the gutter mentally?
Yeah. It's I don't even know how to describe it. It just happens. Something, my physiology changes, my whole mental outlook just changed. And it wasn't, this will sound familiar, it wasn't anything I did. It just happened. And recently, oddly, my old run coach dug up some pictures of me in that race, and there's one of me like coming into the finish line, and I showed it to a friend. They go, God, you don't even look tired. And I was like, I can't explain that, but it happened. And I mean, 29 and a half hours. And at the end, I felt as fresh as I had during that whole time.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly how. I mean, obviously there was a base, there was a good training base for that to happen, but it was spiritual in nature. It had to be.
That's awesome.
To go from that. Yeah.
I've heard that old trope, that your mind will give out before before your body does on an endurance, event. And it seems like that's probably true. I mean, your body had it in you to pick up 30 minutes on the last 25 miles of a 100-mile race. So that earlier battle that you were having was all about your mental state and your mind trying to protect you in the form of
Mm-hmm.
like, let's shut it down, what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
shut it down. In subsequent races, when you got more experience, did you find that you are able to sort of talk yourself through that part with more skill, or does it always just kind of come and go and there's really no way to mitigate the mental sort of chatter when you're hitting a low on a run?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. It definitely has not been linear. On any given race, anything can happen. It could be one of the last 50 milers I did. It was 104 degrees, and
Oh
I
man.
knew it was
That's
hot. Yeah, I knew it was hot. I didn't know it was that hot. I had a friend up there supporting me. He goes, "Yeah, I didn't want to." I said, "Dude, it's hot." He goes, "I didn't really want to tell you, but it was 104." So, when it's like that, there's definitely physiological things going on that'll slow you down and have you want to stop. But I had a friend with me, pacing me, that kept me energized and kept me inspired. A lot of times, Lindsay, I'll draw on things that are important to me, friends that I know would kill to be out there that are no longer with us.
Yeah.
People that are friends that are maybe physically impaired that couldn't do it, that would just love to be in my place. And many times that'll get me to dig a lot deeper in what I'm doing, to finish.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot on our show about the importance of having a why for racing that's external to yourself, or just something like that where you're holding a space for other people. Mike does that with his racing. He specifically, raises funds for a Gold Star family and then carries a flag on the Ironman, which is extra extra challenge, but it's useful, I'm sure, to have that why. And then so I hear that. I'm wondering, you kind of mentioned the spiritual experience part of that first 100-mile race, and um, I'm wondering if you find, I personally find it to be a spiritual experience when I'm out in nature like that. That's how I connect to sort of my version of a higher power, and it sounds like that may be the same for you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, and that's interesting because I'm just thinking about it now. I'm a city boy. Like, I'm from Berkeley. I am not a guy raised in nature, right? Uh, so ultra running has gotten me out into the woods, into the mountains, into the foothills, um, which is something I was not raised with. And it's been one of the highlights of my life. Absolutely, being out there. Excuse me. What am I doing here? How did I get here? And taking the time. One of the things that one of the great things for me of having an experienced coach kind of overseeing me is that they're like, stop, take the time to enjoy where you are. I mean,
Mm.
I've seen you out on the trails down here, Lindsay. It's,
Mhm.
we look around and we just go, whoa, it's unbelievably beautiful. And
Uh-huh.
I would, in a million years, I wouldn't be out there if it wasn't for me getting involved in ultra running and in trail running in particular.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something that I like about There's the running group Ragnar and their trail relays. They at the beginning of the one I've done with them up in Tahoe, they said, unless you are planning on winning this thing, and you know who you are if you're planning on winning this thing, during the race, just stop and look around, because we got to run some ridge lines where you could see Donner and I think over to Tahoe and everything, and just gorgeous. And
Yeah.
the ability to stop and actually take it in is huge, because I guess you could possibly miss it all in your quest to just keep running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? One of the 50 milers I did was the Tahoe Rim TRT 50. There's also a 100 miler in there, and I'll never forget, on my way, I was running with a gentleman, and on our way back, working our way through the mountains, unbelievable course, just, running around Lake Tahoe up in the mountains. There was a dry lightning storm, which was dangerous, but nevertheless, didn't stop us. And the dry lightning would crack, and the whole Tahoe basin would just light up. And we were like,
wow,
whoa, experiencing that. I mean, that's something I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Watching the Tahoe basin light up under a lightning bolt was incredible. Very, very memorable spiritual experience.
I imagine you feel a deep connection to the land you're running on when things like that happen, and when you finally start soaking everything in.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can't wait to get back.
Right.
Yeah.
And for those listeners who might be not ultra runners and maybe not even runners and don't want to be and don't, walking out there is good. Sometimes I just hike out there and I feel like you can't help but feel the power of whatever you want to call it, God, universe, whatever, that there's something bigger than us. And for me, that's very helpful in putting my ego right size, because and so when I can get that down, that's helpful mentally, but also just that sort of, for me anyway, there's like a feeling of home or security in knowing, being out in nature. It's like, okay, we're all just part of this thing. It's good. It's innately good, when you're out there and there's birds and little woodland creatures and whatever. I just feel like that positive energy, and that in and of itself clears my mind of a lot of the garbage that's running through it.
Yeah. I started at the end of 2019. I had a light quote unquote knee procedure. I had some knee surgery done. So the first part of 2020, as I was recovering, I was just walking, and I was out on these trails walking, and I was like, this isn't bad. Like, it's walking is fine. And it was really an eye opener for me, because I had just been so focused on pounding the trails that stopping, by way of knee surgery, that's what it took to get me to actually stop and walk. And it allowed me to really enjoy where I was a lot more than trying to plow through it on a run. So I know exactly what you mean, Lindsay.
I mean, I do like that runner's high for sure. And so when I can run, I run, but every once in a while I walk, or I'll walk with friends, and that's, I do. I mean, it's breathtaking. And of course, where we live, I mean, we live in Northern California, for listeners who don't know, on the coast. So we have ocean, we have mountains, we have redwoods. I mean, we're pretty freaking, every time I think, I could have a much better house for way less money, if I live somewhere else, I go take a run, walk, ride, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, this is why, we live here.
Yeah.
There's something about being outside like that. And for me, it takes a few miles to kind of, let the monkey mind slow down a little bit and start feeling it. And I've had this experience where connected to the place I'm in a sense that where I am and that place is, those barriers start to dissolve. And I see like, oh, I'm just one part of this bigger thing, like you're saying, Lindsay. And it's no longer about me running a race, but about just the environment being there and me part of it. And there's something comforting about seeing, things like really ancient rocks or trees and be like, whatever my problems are, like these things have survived, that and a lot worse. Things are going to be okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can put things into perspective. And I mean, we all know, all of us know that we, in terms of mental health, doing a sport in and of itself is not going to treat the whatever the issue is. I mean, there's so many different issues you could be having. For me, I require a program and vigilance around my sobriety and also depression meds, and you know what I mean? And so I need to meditate and do work with another sober person who helps guide me through some stuff. And there's a bunch of stuff I need to do. But that physical connection with the earth that I get is very grounding to me. Um, and I get that when I get out there and move my body, just something that like deep breaths outside, fresh air, feet on the ground, makes it puts my problems in perspective. It's like
Mm-hmm.
by themselves, my default for my brain is to blow shit out of proportion. You know what I mean? Good or bad, like beep. It's like I can't. It's like looking through one of those. I had one of the when I was a kid. I had one of those things you could turn and it would look. Everything would look all scrambled, right? Like the prism type. That's my brain with any kind of
Kaleidoscope. Yeah.
exactly. um, all right. So Norm, what are you? So you had the knee surgery. Um, what are you? I know that I've heard you mention that you're kind of making your way back towards running and so kind of tell us what these plans are. What are you doing now and what are you planning for the near term?
Yeah. So it's 2020, just kind of, so I recovered from the knee surgery. I started to actually start to hit the trails again. Then I live down in Pescadero in a very wooded area. We had some fires last summer. My house is right in the middle of the fire zone. We were displaced for 7 weeks,
Ooh.
which was very rough. Throw COVID on top of that, throw all the trails down where we are. One of our favorites, Lindsay, it's been locked down for months and months and months. So I feel like I lost almost a whole year of trail running. And so now as things slowly open up, I'm like, okay, I'm coming back. I started hitting some of the trails that are open now, which we're lucky. We still have a lot of them up here that are open, and some are starting to open up. And then I made the big plunge, hired a coach, signed up for a race. So I've got a 50K planned in August.
Nice.
This is a race that I've DNF'd in twice. Which is bizarre. I've run that course on other races and finished fine, but for some reason twice in this particular race, I've not finished it. So, it's full speed ahead training for this race in August. And as I let slip out last week, Lindsay was there, in the back of my mind, I'm like, boy, I sure would like to get one more buckle. Do I have one more buckle left in me? Meaning, do I have one more 100-miler left in me? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's giving me something to shoot for. It's giving me something to aspire to. And just even that makes a difference for me. One other thing I just want to say that's really important for me is that when I came into recovery 36 years ago, I was listening. Once I got my feet on the ground, I was listening to people that I was in meetings with or out and about with in recovery, that I was listening to the people that were doing stuff. They were doing stuff. They were out running races, or they were cycling, or they were just out there taking chances. And that's what I wanted. And that was a big part of what kept me, I'm going to say, that's one of the big part of what kept me sober, was that now you can start to do these things that you always wanted to do, but you couldn't do them because you couldn't get off the bar stool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me that knows that people are watching, people are paying attention to stuff that I'm doing, stuff that Lindsay's doing, and in the back of their mind. And I always hope that, they will hear something that'll just spark something inside of them that says, I could do something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that thought in my head when I was getting sober of like, oh, the fun stops here,
Yeah.
Not that it was
Yeah.
fun. It wasn't
Right.
even fun anymore. I don't know. That's what, like, after I got sober, I'm like, wait a minute. I wasn't having fun. That's one of the, first of all, anymore. But it's the opposite, right? Like you said, like I used to sit on the couch and watch Iron Man and drink my wine and cry because I was so inspired by these people. And I knew like there are people doing that and this is what I'm doing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I can't stop doing it and it sucks. And so, in sobriety, then I go do an Iron Man and it's like, wow, I mean, just that's so much more fun.
Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is so much more full for me, sober. I just didn't know it until I got out of the fog. But you're right. Seeing people like yourself, Norm, like when I first get sober, then there's people who are sober who are doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, oh shit, maybe the fun's not over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is attraction.
Yeah.
It is attraction.
Right.
I kind of imagine it like, getting sober or stopping all the fun things I used to inject or put into my body. It would be like living a Puritan life, just like boring, hard work, and miserable, but like somehow worth it through sacrifice. And I was like, no, that's actually fun. It's actually really nice. I got another question for you, Norm. So when and this has been tough for me. So when you are recovering physically or are injured and running's not available to you, what helps you get the peace of mind, that clarity, or that those benefits that you get from running, or what keeps you going?
Well, that's a great question. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Some form of physical, I could walk, like I said, once I had recovered enough from my knee surgery that I could walk, that helped a lot. I could start work. I need to do something physical for sure. So walking helped. There were things I could do in the gym. I started working with the trainer, and just staying connected to my running buddies, listening to what they were doing, cheering them on, gave me some hope. But that was a tough one, Mike. How these things go. Like I can go right down the rat hole mentally if I allow myself to. And I'm like, God, am I ever going to be able to run again? Am I ever going to race again? And I'm no spring chicken. It's like the clock is ticking over here. Some of my friends are like, oh no, we'll do it next year. We'll do it. We can do it next. And I'm like, I don't know if I got next year. Like, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, there's not many guys my age out there pounding out 30, 40, 50-mile races.
Right.
There's a few. The ones that are out there are badass. But there's not that many. So I kind of have that that element of play in there too. So it's tricky, Mike. It's tricky. There's been a couple of times in the last few years where I wasn't able or capable of getting out there, and it was I had to immerse myself a lot more in the program.
Mm-hmm.
To fill myself up spiritually, to take the place of that physical outlet that I had.
Yeah, it's tough. I didn't realize the extent to which I lean on racing until a little over a year ago when COVID shut the world down.
Yeah.
A lot of people came to that realization. They were
Oh
like,
God,
oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
shit.
races were fun and I knew I enjoyed them, but I was like, wow, I leaned so hard on them, so then it was like all of us trying to scramble to be like, now what? Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's that edge that that's part of that edge that you're talking about, Norm, I think is yes. I mean, there was the one edge of us having the personalities we have with the addictive personalities, overdoing it. But there's this other edge of like not getting your identity too wrapped up in the sport that you're doing, because that may not and is not likely to last forever. So like, who are you if you're not an ultra distance runner? Who are you if you're not a triathlete? Like, and how can you be okay, in that? And for me, that's I mean, I'm 50. I still have years I can do it, but it's on the horizon. I see that there's a point. I've had knee problems during Ironman training. It's like there's going to be a point where this isn't maybe going to be an option, and then what will be. So I'm a planner. I've already got some plans happening. Swimming is good. You can do that till way later. I can get that little weight belt and get in the pool and do my little thing.
Yes.
Yoga is a good one. Certain types of yoga, not all of them, but like I'm kind of like, okay, I'll be swimming and doing yoga until I'm really, really old, and then that's what I'm going to do. But yeah, so there's that edge of not letting it define you as a human being, because if it gets taken, then you're at a loss, I feel like.
Yeah.
Well, here's something that made it even tougher for a lot of us is that, if we're leaning on racing, that's gone, then we can say, okay, we can go back to our communities and start serving them and get together with people and just help them. But what took it away from us last year is not being able to get together physically with people, made it so much harder. So it really had to come down, I think, for me and probably a lot of us, to the principles of service to other people and that attitude of like knowing how we can improve other people's lives and how we can lean on a higher power.
Yeah, I think anytime we can get out of ourselves, there's a benefit there. It doesn't have to be physical. So if I mean, I think helping others is that's a really good point, Mike. Like that's a as fast of a like relief as getting running is if I go help somebody else. I feel that relief pretty much right away.
So I in my job as a therapist, I try to avoid giving advice as much as possible. Like I try to avoid it so hard, but some of the suggestions that I give people, if I give any, or to call people up and just tell them how grateful you are for them and that way serve them. And it's one of the most underrated, quickest ways to start feeling better is doing that to people in your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so I think we need to wrap up soon. I know Mike has to go make pancakes for his kids.
Yep.
And Norm, I know we have a mutual friend that you've been running with. I know she mentioned it, and so she and I talked recently about me coming down that way and going for a run with you guys. So I'm hoping to do that soon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That'll be very fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I can keep up with you guys, but I'm gonna try.
Let me tell you, that girl can run. She's tough. Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah. She eats up those hills like, whoa.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Oh no.
Yeah. Don't worry, you'll always have me to fall back on. I'll be,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, you inspire me, and I've talked to you before about wanting to do a 50 miler. I have one. I want to do the AR50. I know which one it is, but I'm back on the triathlon, you know, whatever triathlon tip for a little bit. But it's there, and you've been you've been inspirational, and I appreciate that. Um, Mike, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I got one question might be good to go out on for you, Norm, is so for people listening who maybe run a little bit or aren't that big into running and hear this conversation about just pain and suffering during a run, what makes it worth it? And or what would you say to people to help them get into running and really give it a fair go?
What makes it worth it? Um, it's the process, Mike. This is just for me. It's the
Yeah.
process of getting myself to that event and then pushing, like, what do I have inside of me? Like, what am I made of, so to speak? Because those ultra events will push you to the limit,
Yeah.
physically and mentally. And so the payoff for me is it's a real physical test, which of course is tied hand in glove to the mental side of it. So it's a challenge. It's the ultimate challenge,
Mhm.
across the board. Getting your life to a point, your life has to be working pretty well to be trained up to do an events like you guys do, like some of the ones that I've done. So a lot of things have to be working, and that ultimately makes it worth it.
Mm. Yeah.
And hopefully, like I said, hopefully somebody's noticing and they're going, huh, you know, I
Yeah.
think I could do that.
Yeah. I know very certain 99% that we have some listeners right now who are just thinking, I wish maybe someday I could. And I think that's the seed we're planting right now. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing that story, yours, Norm.
Yeah,
And,
thank you very much. Mhm.
and if you aren't a runner or you're just starting and you go, I go out and I do like I can't imagine doing 182 miles and it sucks. What I'll say from my experience, and I haven't done anything nearly as long as Norm, but I've done um, marathons the longest I've done. I've done trail and road marathon. And what I'd say for me is that I, when I was switching, I was a sprinter. So when I was switching from short to long, I had that same mentality like, why would I want to do 10 when two sucks, right?
Yeah.
But actually, there's an ebb and flow. So the first two might suck, and then you warm up, and then you've got four or five that are amazing, and then it goes back to sucking again for a little bit, and then I always know mile 8 for me always sucks. 8 to like 10, I always feel like shit. It doesn't matter how fit I am, whatever, and then at mile 10, I'm good again until mile, whatever, 18 or something, and then I'm like, ugh. But so that's what I'd say for a newbie in terms of you have to learn a mental skill of overriding your immediate thoughts, which are just stop doing this bullshit. That's the immediate
Mhm,
thought,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
Hmm.
like you were saying, Norm, when you were coming up to that in that first 100 miler, your brain's going, yeah, I'm done. If you just find that way to kind of like suspend that and go, I could be done, but let me see if I go a little bit longer, what happens? I feel like and that's a skill I've used to overcome some anxiety, some things that happen to me in life, that are part of my mental health stuff. It's like that first thought of like, oh, I go, well, let me just suspend that for a minute
Yeah.
and
Mhm,
keep moving forward. And that's a skill I learned doing triathlon
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
to see if it changes. It might change in, you know, a mile or 500
Mhm,
feet or,
mhm.
Yeah.
so keep running and see what happens,
Yeah.
guys.
And get a buddy. Get a
Mhm.
Yes.
buddy. Get a buddy. That's huge. Get somebody
Mhm.
you can go out there with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
You'd be surprised what people reveal to you when you go on a long run or a ride. You
Yeah.
learn a lot about people. You learn people you think are perfect have stuff going on too, and you to get closer to them, and it's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. All right, buddy. Thanks for showing up. And I'd love for you to share, if you can, a picture of yourself running. We can post it on social media when we do when we drop the episode. And I don't know if you can get that one that your coach took of you finishing, but I'd love to see that. If I can see a digital version of that, that would be
I'll
awesome.
dig it up and send it to you.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
really, yeah. Thank you for even asking about that. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Hmm.
All righty, guys. I think we did it.
I think so.
Yeah.